Hey everyone, welcome to Outlaws, the High Times series that dives deep into the renegades who built cannabis culture from the ground up. I'm Holly, and today we're heading to the Black Hills of South Dakota to sit down with Bob Newland, founder of SoDak NORML, hemp and cannabis activist who's had more than a couple run-ins with the law. I first met Bob about 20 years ago, and he was one of the voices who first lit the spark for me to learn everything I could about the plant and to keep pushing for sane cannabis education. All right, let's meet Bob. Hey Bob, thank you so much for joining me today for this episode of High Times Outlaw Series. I'm stoked to see what we chat about. I think we've known each other for like 20 years now, but I haven't talked to you in probably 15 of those. So, how the hell are you? Where are you? What's going on in your world?
Well, I'm in my house in Hot Springs, South Dakota, which is somewhere in the north central provinces. Uh, I have lost my train of thought. So,
Well, you've been busy the last couple weeks
yeah.
because
Well, every year for 20 years, I've sat alongside the road in Spearfish Canyon in the Black Hills during the largest tourist event on the planet. And
literally, like literally.
tried to shoot or photograph every biker that goes by. And in 16 days, I got 50,000 photographs.
Holy shit.
I try to make these like portraits of people on bikes, and it's always been very successful. It's probably the best photographic gig in the world.
Well, for anyone that doesn't know, the Sturgis Motorcycle Rally happens every August. What year are we in now?
This is this is the so-called 85th anniversary.
Wow. Okay, that's a milestone. This is massive. We're talking like, I don't even know what some of the record numbers have been, but this
Well,
takes over the entire Black Hills. It's wild.
the record number was set in 2015, which was the 75th. This is the second largest since numbers have been kept. Tourism says that 537,000 people attended. And there is no other tourist event in the world that draws that kind of a crowd.
It's hard to conceptualize too, like if you've never been to the area. Like these are small towns we're talking about. These are not like big cities with massive sprawl. Like these cities, Sturgis and Rapid City and Spearfish, these are small towns with an insane influx of people. So, we're both from South Dakota. We've seen so many Sturgis rallies, but your view is unique. But this is not where you started in photography. You have been a photographer for decades. Like you started photographing rodeo, correct?
That's correct. I was raised on a ranch in northeastern Wyoming near Belfouche, South Dakota, which was the destination of the cattle drive in the movie The Cowboys. Uh, I wanted to rodeo when I was a kid in 4-H in high school, and my dad said there are plenty of opportunities to break bones in legitimate ranch work, and he would never sign a release for me to rodeo. And I'm thankful to that because I did break bones in legitimate ranch work.
I'm sure you did. Yeah,
I
absolutely.
got married in '67. And in 1977, my kids were rodeoing. So I bought a camera and started shooting, and then people started wanting pictures of their kids. So for about 10 years, I photographed rodeos at all levels, from preschool age to professional rodeo. And after that amount of time, I decided there was a less physically strenuous way to lose money.
That's a good way to say it. Yep.
So I went into pot advocacy.
Yeah, in the Midwest back then, that makes perfect sense. A lot of support for that, I'm sure. What does that mean to you? Like, what did pot advocacy mean back then?
Well, I'll start with my earliest experience with cannabis was at the University of Minnesota in a dorm room listening to Frank Zappa and the album Freak Out and smoking what was probably ditchweed.
Yep. Yeah.
Then the next day I saw headlines in the paper where there was a big pot bust in Minneapolis, and thinking, why? And that question's always bugged me throughout my life, because since I was 18 years old, I've smoked cannabis on more days than I have not. And all along I've seen the incredible, absurd stupidity of cannabis laws and ruination of countless lives. But up until about 1993, I always had this feeling like I was being kind of naughty when I'm smoking weed. And that's common among people because nobody likes to break a law, especially not when the consequences are so out of sync with the possible damage.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
And Keith Stroup, the founder of NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, gave an interview to Playboy in about 1969. And I read that, and that Keith explained things pretty well, although the science had not advanced to the point where we could definitely say that weed doesn't hurt you. We, as adults, we were always trying to be cautious about letting your kids smoke weed, because really drawing smoke into your lungs is intuitively a bad thing. We've since found out that there simply is no evidence of any bad effect from inhaling marijuana smoke. And the fact is that among people who smoke weed regularly and don't smoke cigarettes, lung cancer is unknown. It does not exist. People who smoke weed and cigarettes have a lower incidence of lung cancer than the general population. But those are things I've learned since about the turn of the century.
So was that when, okay, so NORML was like, became in your awareness around then. And what was happening? Like states were forming their own chapters and you were like, hey, I want to bring this education to South Dakota. Like, how did that come about?
NORML had a model of state chapters, and
Okay.
I was not involved with it until about 1993. Somebody sent me a copy of Jack Herer's book, The Emperor Wears No Clothes. Now that was a life changer for me. It just, while there is some inaccurate information in there, overall it was the best book on pot and hemp that had been published to that time. And it just made me insanely angry when I read that and realized at that time, he said there'd been something like 30 million person years of prison time given to people for smoking weed. So it's got to be 4 or 5 times that by now.
Sure. Yeah.
And about 97, I formed the SoDak NORML, South Dakota NORML, and started advocating for sane laws in the legislature, and became quickly disenchanted with the level of intelligence that I was up against in legislative committees. But it didn't take long for me to become more or less a statewide known person, because nobody was going public, and news organizations were calling on me because I was good for copy, I guess. Uh,
You're
so,
certainly an outlier in South Dakota.
well, I have always been annoyed by the lack of spine on the part of people who could have changed legislators' minds if they had spoken out. But there was a tremendous amount of fear on the part of people who had public lives outside of marijuana, that they would hurt their careers. And that's probably true.
Yeah.
Uh, but since I had no career, I had nothing to lose. And I was generally known as just kind of a hard drinking party guy. I ran for office and pretty much kept myself out of any contention for being elected to office by getting DUIs. So,
What office were you running for?
contributed to a negative, and I was an easy target for the people who hated what I was doing. Then I switched from cannabis as a mind-altering substance advocacy to hemp because it was an easier task.
Right.
And at the time I did this, around 2000, there was a general drift in that direction. So it became easier and easier, although we were still up against the legislature. And I just said that there's 105 members of the legislature in South Dakota, and I think the cumulative IQ is lower than 105.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I don't think South Dakota's ever prided itself on intelligent government leadership.
Myself as being 49th or 50th and everything.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
You know, of course, that the current head of DHS is Kristi Noem, governor of South Dakota, who is the most nasty person.
Yeah, she is. She's not a nice lady,
That's
and
right.
no friend of anyone cannabis related of any kind. That's for sure.
Yeah, she said once, I don't think anybody made themselves any smarter by smoking weed. And I replied, in your case, it wouldn't hurt to try.
Yeah, yeah. I can back that one, Bob. So the pivot to hemp was smart, a smaller hill to climb for sure, and I think maybe something. Talk to me a little bit about what the hemp scene looks like in South Dakota, because I don't think when people, well, I don't think when people think of South Dakota, they think of anything cannabis related. But like, obviously that's definitely not true. There's a very rich culture around hemp there, particularly when we start talking about the reservation. So tell me a little bit more about what it meant to switch to hemp and, what that scene kind of looked like.
Well, when I first started going to the legislature, there were 3 or 4 old timer legislators who remembered farming hemp during World War II in the Hemp for Victory campaign. And those guys were pretty much on my side. But the people of my generation were the worst. And it just, their willful ignorance was so frustrating. In 2000, I and some like-minded people organized what we called the Hemp Hoe Down. And the hoe down was hoeing down bad laws. And had some local shopper newspapers who liked the idea, gave us a front cover, and 3,000 people showed up for $1 a piece. And some bands gave their time, and it was great. And we had picketers, which always helps.
Yep, absolutely.
So for, I think, 15 years, around the middle of April, we had a hemp hoedown. And there were always people busted leaving the hoedown, but we never really got too much hassle from the cops at the parties themselves. Had really good musical bands donate their time to us, and it was the principal money raiser for my legislative efforts. I never really had an organization. We put together an organization ad hoc every year, but SoDak NORML never really attracted many people, and that's because people didn't want their names on lists as being pot advocates. In, I think it was 2001, at the Sturgis Motorcycle Rally, I met Jeremy Briggs, and he and Erica Merchant, who was his girlfriend at the time, had a booth where I don't even remember what they were selling. T-shirts, I think. Yeah, that was Jeremy's gig at the time, was doing T-shirts. And he's just such a vibrant character. And I soon found out that he is the best extemporaneous speaker I've ever associated with. He can give an interesting speech for half an hour about the benefits of cannabis and the disadvantages of the stupidity of cannabis laws, which I'd like to talk about for just a second.
Please do.
Every single law that mentions cannabis is insane. That includes the legalization laws. First of all, there was never a reason to outlaw cannabis. The first anti-cannabis laws were disguised, anti-hemp laws were disguised as anti-drug laws. And it was in order to give the Hearst newspapers a monopoly on the forests that they own as a source for paper. So if you couldn't grow hemp, then you couldn't make paper out of hemp, and all that business went to the Hearst forests. Then Hearst started running news stories that were absolutely fiction about people smoking weed and then killing their grandmothers with meat cleavers.
Absurd propaganda.
It doesn't take much of that to get people upset.
Sure. Yep. The old reefer madness.
So the first hemp law was you had to get a tax stamp in order to grow hemp, because there were still some rope manufacturers in the United States. But it became harder and harder to get the tax stamp until finally they just didn't issue them anymore. So that was a way to close out legal cannabis in the country. It was in the early 60s that the pro-Vietnam War forces started attacking cannabis because the anti-war group was known for smoking weed. And so it became pot makes you a communist.
Naturally, yes, of course.
And then pot makes you gay.
Oh, okay, yep.
And then pot makes you kill people. And they went back and forth between pot takes away all your ambition to pot makes you a vicious killer. They never could make up their mind.
Yeah, which is it? Are you sitting on your ass doing nothing, or are you running around with a pickaxe swinging at people?
John Ehrlichman, who is one of Richard Nixon's counselors, admitted after he got out of jail that it was always about race and politics. That it didn't have anything to do with any actual damage. In fact, there are 4 major government studies that were done about the cannabis plant. One was the Indian Hemp Commission of over a century ago. The LaGuardia Commission, when Fiorello LaGuardia was governor of New York. The Schaefer Commission that Nixon appointed in 1970, and then the Institutes of Medicine study that came out in about 2001. All 4 of those commissions said there is absolutely no reason to put people in jail for using weed. In 72, when the Schaefer Commission, this guy Schaefer was a former governor of Pennsylvania, Nixon chose him because he thought that he would come up with a result that favored Nixon's ideas. Well, it was just the opposite. Ed Schaefer said there's no reason to criminalize cannabis. Nixon is on tape with Bob Haldeman, another of his counselors, who also did time in jail. Nixon is saying, I was just seeing something in the paper this morning about it, Bob. The papers are saying that Schaefer thinks there's no reason to punish people. He says, it's those Jews, Bob. What the Christ is the matter with the Jews? Could be because they're all psychiatrists. I mean, that.
Oh my God.
And that was the way it was. The very first Bureau of Narcotics director was a guy named Harry Anslinger, who was appointed in 1935 about. And he went to Congress and said, marijuana makes darkies think they're as good as white men. Mm-hmm. And he also said that smoking weed was the only way to get white women to actually want to touch dark-skinned men. So that pretty much tells you what you need to know about that deal.
Yeah, it's fucking gross. It's insane that using a plant to like spur racism is insane. It's an insane concept.
Yeah, well, it's certainly in full flower today.
Yes. So take me back to then. You had just mentioned you had met, Jeremy and Erica. We're doing these hoedowns now, which I want to mention. You said how Jeremy's such an incredible speaker, and when you were saying that, I can hear him with the microphone in his hand. The infamous hemp hoorays that we all chanted repeatedly. Which, funny, I was at his wedding last summer, and Jeremy's making his speech, at the reception dinner, and he just could not help himself but at the end to throw in a hemp hooray. And it was just so so perfect for Jeremy. I loved it. But I can hear him, hemp is the longest, strongest, most durable fiber with hundreds of uses of XYZ. He knows the plant inside and out. He was just such a strong hemp advocate. And you and him in that time, that was really when the sparklet for me personally too was working at those hemp hoe downs, attending the hemp hoe downs, our time spent on the Pine Ridge Reservation, learning with Alex White Plume. That kind of lit a whole generation, I think, of future activists to start working with the plant. Like, that was such a spark that was lit, seeing you and Jeremy in those times. Like, that, those moments really changed my life. It's probably why I'm here today in a certain sense.
Well, I can see how that would happen, because it kind of what happened to me.
Yeah.
The White Plume Affair did raise nationwide animosity toward the federal government. The tribal council on the Pine Ridge Reservation had legalized hemp. So on the reservation, which is supposed to be a sovereign nation, White Plume decided to plant hemp. And in the spring of 2000, he planted. In around September of that year, a joint task force of DEA, FBI, BIA, Bureau of Indian Affairs, and local law enforcement raided this field, which was really just about an acre of hemp plants, and surrounded it, chopped it down, threw it in a trailer, and took it to the School of Mines in Rapid City and stored it in a basement where it rotted. I talked to local cops who were in on that raid, and they were very uncomfortable because here they were going in and destroying a crop, and no arrests were made. One of the reasons they never arrested White Plume was because they knew they would not be able to find a jury in South Dakota that would convict him. Because the general population does believe in the sovereignty of reservations. Mm-hmm. White Plume planted hemp the next year and the next. And after the third planting, an insane federal judge in South Dakota issued an injunction against White Plume having anything to do with hemp. If he touched hemp, he would be in violation of the injunction, which would allow them to throw him in jail for up to 18 months for contempt of court. So that effectively ended his ability to do anything. And now he's back to growing hemp on the reservation. There are weed stores on the reservation. There are medical dispensaries, and I do air quotes there because I'm back to the insanity of even the legalization laws. In South Dakota, no licensed physician has yet written a recommendation for cannabis because they're afraid of what the feds may do to them. Because in the height of absurdity, and despite all the states with legal weed and medical weed, cannabis still appears as a Schedule 1 drug on the federal schedule of stupid drugs that you can't use. Periodically, doctors from other states come to South Dakota, have what they call seminars, and you bring $350 to the seminar and sit through a few minutes of talking and then meet with the doctor and say, I need weed. They sign a piece of paper that's a recommendation. Take your $350. Then you can go to the dispensary and buy overpriced weed.
That's a racket.
Yeah. Well,
But what else?
one of the questions that you wrote down was, did the people who should have profited from legal weed profit? Problem is, almost every state has made it impossible for anybody with a drug felony to be involved in the legal weed market. Now, these are the people who sacrificed their lives to get us to where we are now, which is actually not very far. Yes, some states you can pretty much fearlessly smoke weed, but that was always the case, even in the full flight of illegal weed. In highly populated, more democratic states, cops simply didn't bother with weed because they were smarter. In the red states, and at the federal level, weed laws led to unimaginable corruption among cops. And all this for a benign medical, I can't think, homeopathic remedy for many things that never killed anyone. Still, there is no record of anyone dying from smoking weed. And you can't say that about strawberries. You can say that about milk.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. Tell me a little bit more about some of the. I know you have had encounters with law enforcement, but tell me a little bit about some of those stories or some of the corruption that you're alluding to.
I estimate that I have committed a pot crime around 40,000 times just in driving across downtown in my car with some weed.
Sounds about right. Yep.
3 times I did get stopped and searched and caught with a pipe. I never got caught, except one time, with actual weed. But I did get, and there was a time when having a pipe was a misdemeanor, paraphernalia, they called it.
Mm-hmm.
And all during this time, I was a kind of a chicken shit pot dealer and cocaine dealer. I'd sometimes buy some weed and sometimes sell some of it just to cut my own expenses. And I also hung out with lawyers, which was, I thought, kind of insurance.
Right. It should be.
Throughout the 70s and 80s, I dealt weed and or cocaine to 5 sitting judges and 6 sitting prosecutors and several South Dakota legislators and the Attorney General of South Dakota. And there came a time when I realized, that's a dangerous thing to do, so I quit. And I did open my mouth one time at a public drug awareness meeting and said, you people are sitting here at something organized by the Attorney General of South Dakota, with whom I have snorted cocaine. And shortly after that, I was I was prosecuted for a chicken shit sales tax violation, selling photography without a sales tax license. The amount of sales tax was, they assessed it at $700. I paid it, but I had violated a felony, and that attorney general, and his name was Roger Tellenhuisen, took on that case personally and stacked charges against me to the point where I had to plead guilty to a misdemeanor, and he was going to recommend a 10-month sentence, which it was just enormously unbalanced, the charge and the penalty. But I did 6 months in jail, and I got out when the attorney general got caught banging his secretary in his office by the secretary's husband.
Oh, yeah.
And
That'll do it.
and when he was out of office, then I was able to negotiate with the next attorney general saying this is bullshit, and he said I agree, and he got my sentence commuted. So I did 6 months of a 10-month sentence in a county jail. And county jails, well, no jail's fun, but county jails are worse than a pen for anything long term. Then in 2009, by that time, we were all aware of the value of cannabis in alleviating wasting syndrome, giving people an appetite, particularly those with AIDS. And so I had 4 or 5 AIDS patients that I both sold to and gave weed to while I was advocating in the legislature. And I got stopped by a cop for speeding. And in the car, I had 4 bagged ounces, a scale, empty baggies. Okay, that's
A whole kit.
possession with intent to distribute.
Yeah.
What they charged me with. And the thing was, if I had it in the trunk, it would have been okay. But this was real bad skunk weed. And the cop came up to the window, and I saw his expression change when he whiffed the skunk.
Yeah.
Anyway, I got charged with intent to distribute and offered a deal to plead to felony possession. 2 ounces was a felony. I had 4. I had just weighed the weed out, so I knew there was an ounce in each bag. When the lab report came back, there was a pinch gone from each bag. So they said I had 3.75 ounces. Somebody in the lab had stolen a 1/4 ounce.
Oh yeah. Had to test that out at home. Make sure it was good.
The judge in front of whom I appeared, I had snorted cocaine and smoked pot with him when he was just another drug lawyer in Spearfish. He gave me a sentence of a year in prison with all suspended except 45 days, which I had to go to work release. He added the stipulation that during that year I could not speak publicly to advocate for weed. Nobody had ever seen anything like that added to. And I was urged to fight that, but I wasn't really interested in it. First of all, I'd had to go to the Supreme Court of the United States because the South Dakota Supreme Court would have upheld it. And even though the ACLU was willing to take the case, I just didn't feel like doing it. At my sentencing, the judge went off on a ramble about Muhammad Ali, saying how he had been charged with a serious crime, but he didn't. He stayed and took his medicine. He didn't, as if there were some parallel between me and Muhammad Ali. I,
Oh,
yeah,
grasping at straws on that one.
I think he thought he was being complimentary to me and friendly. He really didn't need to send me to jail. There was no mandatory sentence to that. And a month after I got off probation, that judge had to retire because he reached the 70-year mark in South Dakota, and then he was at a speech I went to, and we talked. And the first thing he said to me was, they ought to fucking legalize marijuana. And I said,
God.
why didn't you say that at my sentencing?
Yeah, what the fuck?
Given that you knew you were going to have to leave office anyway, you weren't going to face another vote. So those are just examples of the spineless stupidity and insanity that all of us in the weed community have had to put up with all of our lives. And just the millions of people whose careers were destroyed before they even got into them, simply because they had a marijuana bust.
Mm-hmm.
The Army had military in general had to change its policy from not taking weed smokers or anybody who had ever been convicted to making people promise that they hadn't had any weed for 3 months before they signed up.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sounds good. And I mean, that's just such that's the thing. Like, that judge that, sitting there smacking his gavel down and then in the background being like, oh, by the way, like, I'm just talking out of my ass here. Like, that's such a sentiment. And that happens on such bigger stages all around the world today, all the time. Like, this hypocrisy and the bullshit. Like, why? Like, why are we still holding up any kind of, ridiculous face around this? It's so insane. I just, it's just hard to comprehend even all these years later. No matter how much progress we've made, it still just feels pulled so far back from where it should be.
Well, I'm not sure that we've made much progress. There are fewer people going to jail for weed. I remember one of the last times I went to the legislature was several years after legalization in Colorado, and in a legislative hearing over a bill that I'd had introduced, a legislator said, well, if you like the laws in California, right? And I said, well, they're better than they are here. And he said, well, if you like it so well in Colorado and you like smoking weed so much, why don't you just go to Colorado? And I said, if I ever have to take more than 15 minutes to find a bag in the Black Hills, I'll consider it. I mean, I had always argued that the law is stupid because it didn't do any good. It didn't stop a single person from smoking weed.
No, it just made us do it in a more secretive manner to a certain extent, or on private land or whatever. I mean,
pay a tax every once in a while when you got caught.
Yep, that is true. That is true. Yeah, growing up in South Dakota always felt to me like such an oppressive place, stuck in a time that never moved on. But your point is correct. Like, it didn't really matter where you were. Like, this shit is still federally illegal. There's still going to be bad cops no matter what, whether they look the other way or slap you with a ticket or whatever. There's still this bigger stigma, and everybody that loved smoking weed was always going to find a way to smoke weed, no matter where they were and who they were with and what they were doing. We were all getting high.
If we wanted to.
If we wanted to, yeah. If we want to get high, we're getting high.
Yeah, when I was in my youth, every year around April, get to be a big drought of available weed.
Right. Yep.
You wait till harvest, and then there was plenty of weed. And every single year, that drought got shorter and shorter because people found ways to get weed. Well, they were doing indoor grows and getting weed here in the dry season.
What's been maybe one of your like favorite or proudest moments working in and around politics or in and around hemp advocacy? Like, what sticks out to you as something you feel proud of or love to remember?
Well, I didn't really have any successes to talk about, but I did get an email not very long ago from a formerly rabidly anti-weed lobbyist who said, "I got to give it to you, Bob. You were right about medical cannabis. I don't know what his ailment is, but he says it's done me a great deal of good." So
I think that's a win.
yeah, well, it's not a loss.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, hey, like, you know, those are ripple effects, you know? Sometimes it's just like, who knows who else he's going to affect as he crosses paths with people throughout the rest of his career, or, you know, might make some changes somewhere down the line. So I think that's a win.
By the way, I did enjoy your interview with Nick from Humboldt County.
Yes.
I remember going through Humboldt in 2001 in late September. The entire county smelled like skunk.
Yeah, the first harvest I ever went out to Humboldt was like blew my mind. Yes, the aroma, but almost how like the entire culture and the shops and everything just cater to the fact that it's harvest season. Like you walk into a Home Depot and there's like, you know, little empty gas canisters. Like, don't forget to run your generators, or like displays of turkey bags all stacked up at the front, and, you know, Fiskars scissors lining every end cap at a grocery store. You know, like that entire community was built around the fact that, hey, we're harvesting in Humboldt. I thought that was just something so cool when I first went out there, you know?
Well, send me something. You can see my jar's empty.
Oh, man. All right, Bob, we got to get you hooked back up. Well, this has been so fun talking to you today. I really appreciate you taking the time, especially during rally season. And, you know, I hope that everybody listening here today is just inspired to maybe find a little way to advocate or speak out where they are now, no matter their political climate. And thank you so much for being one of the people that lit a spark for me to set me out on this path, because it's been a hell of a lot of fun.
So you remember at the hemp construction nights down in Giza Park, and
Yep.
Amy would come up every night with, "This is what's your favorite part of the day?"
Yep, favorite part of the day.
She's a sweetheart. You're a sweetheart.
Well, we got big love for you, Bob. Thanks again so much for sharing some of your stories with us.
Bob Newland. Fuck yeah.
Fuck yeah.